Sometimes it's nice to be able to get what's called a string representation of an object. So what do I mean by that? Let's say we create a list of integers. We'll say it's just a list of like 4, -2, 10, 20, 30. Okay? And let's say we want to print out the elements of that list. What we can do is do ls.toString, and then this will convert it into a list. Okay? But let's actually put this in a main method just to make it clearer, or not clearer, but yeah. So what happens here? The toString method will convert this list into a string where all the elements are separated by a comma and a space character. And then they're enclosed by this opening and closing bracket. Okay? But the question is, how exactly did that happen? Well, what happened is that Java, or rather the list, the way this list is defined is that we have a method called toString. And what this will do is it will traverse over the elements and create a string where every element is converted into a string and then put into this new string with everything separated by commas and a space and then enclosed by the brackets. Okay? So, in fact, you may have tried to do this with an array. Like, let's say you try to create the same thing but as an array, and then you maybe wanted to print out the elements of the array. Well, if we try to do this with an array, we're going to get something a little bit bizarre. We're going to get this thing. So, what in the world is this thing? So, this is all a bunch of bizarre information, but this is actually something, this string of numbers right here, is something called the object hash code. And for now, just for now, the hash code is a unique identifier for an object. Okay? A unique identifier for some object. Okay? And then this information, or rather these two things, are just information about what kind of object this is. Okay? So by default in Java, the default behavior of the toString method is to print out the object's hash code. And basically some other information about the type as well, which is just this information right here. Okay? But what if we don't want to do that? Like, for example, let's say we have let's get rid of these examples, and let's say we have a point, we'll pass it 3, 4, and then we want to print out p1.toString. Well, here we get the information that this is a point, and then we get its hash code. Okay, but that's not very useful. Let's say we instead want this to print out perhaps the coordinates of a point. So there's a couple ways we could do this. We could say maybe when we call toString we want it to be something like this, where the coordinates are separated by a comma and a space and then enclosed by parentheses like it is in math. Another way might be to have something like x equals and then the x coordinate, comma, space, and then y equals, then the y coordinate, and then a closing parenthesis. Okay? So there's infinitely many ways we could do this. Let's say we want to do this approach here. So when we print out a point, or when we convert it into a string, rather, we want it to be represented like this. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, just like with dot equals, there's another method that we can override. And that method is something called the toString method. So public string toString. Okay? So just like with dot equals, we have to copy this header exactly. Public string toString with the uppercase S with no parameters. Okay? You must copy it exactly like this, otherwise it will not work. Okay? So what do we want to do? This is actually very straightforward. All we have to do is just say return, and then we can just take the x and y coordinates and put them in one giant string. So what did we say it was? We said open parenthesis x equals plus this dot x plus comma space plus y equals quote plus this dot y plus then right parenthesis. Okay? So, and that's it. That's really all it is to it. So, let's say we want to write a test case, and indeed we should have done this before, but as I've said before, do as I say and not as I do. Okay? So, let's create a point P1, and let's create maybe like a point with negative coordinates and maybe like multiple digits to it. And then we'll create a point at the origin, which is just using the default constructor. Okay? And then we'll say assert equals, and then we'll put something for the expected in a minute, and we'll call it like that. Okay? So P2, P3. The expected string method is, or the expected string output, not method, is open parenthesis, x equals 3, y equals 4. Okay? And then we'll copy this for this one, which is x equals negative 3,123. The y coordinate is expected to be negative 34. And then here, both the x and the y are expected to be 0. Okay? And as we see, all tests pass.